It's usually at the beginning of the year where you turn over a calendar and see a whole new side of things and the way things are going to move forward for the next 12 months. Well, the same thing basically happened on July 1st, and we're going to talk all about it here on Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Total Sports Beyond the Lights. I am your host this evening, Ed Smith, and with me is David Street.
What's up, y'all? And by the way, we are only 11 subs away from 100 YouTube subscribers. So if you could, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, tell your friends, tell your family members, tell your enemies, tell your bosses, tell whoever you can. Yes, we want more than 100, but that's a small goal that we're reaching right now. Only 11 away from 100. So if you could please help us get there, we would greatly appreciate that. Ed?
Yeah, we've got Matthew Allen Street handing out flyers trying to help out do the same thing. So he is not with us this evening. We'll try and get him back as soon as we can, and we'll see what happens there. David, we have hit the time of the year where we flip the page of the calendar, and it isn't January 1st, but July 1st. And the leagues that had just finished up in the NBA and the NHL have just gone crazy. And I want to hop in with some NBA stuff. From the moves that you've seen of the Philadelphia 76ers, because I feel like they have been somewhat of a highlight team in this free agent frenzy that's happening over the past couple of days. What sticks out to you in that?
Well, it has to be the signing of Paul George, right? Now, personally, me being biased, I thought it would have been better for him to come to Orlando, but that's a topic for another time. But yeah, I think this is a great get for for Philadelphia. Now, Paul George is 34, 35 years old, so he's pretty much past his prime now at this point. So he's not really the same player as he was before, but he certainly is still good enough to provide you solid minutes to provide you with scoring, with shooting, and all that. At this point, he's still very much good enough to be a solid contributing piece on a contender like Philadelphia.
Yeah, and something I have seen over the past few months leading up to this, because of course the NBA playoffs last 6 months, apparently. The fan base for the 76ers, I feel like they have been hollering from the mountaintops for them to go get Paul George. And makes me wonder if this is a reactionary move by management to not uh, disavow what the fan base is asking for, or if this is truly them doing the scouting and them doing the legwork to see how his game fits in with the other signings and the extensions that they have provided with Tyrese Maxey and Andre Drummond, along with Embiid coming back next year. Is it the fit of Paul George's game that they've been asking for, or is it the players themselves asking for this marriage of personnel?
I mean, I think you could argue that it's a combination of both. I mean, I just think that when you have someone like Paul George, who, yes, earlier I did say that he's past his prime at this point, but he's still very valuable to any championship contending team. And when a player like that is available in the market, fit or not, you have to go after him. And I think the Sixers did a good job of targeting him. And kudos to them, obviously, for getting the big fish in the pond.
Absolutely. And really, that's the first and maybe the biggest domino that was out there in free agency to fall outside of Los Angeles, which I think we all know LeBron, who is a free agent, is tied to the Lakers now that Bronny James was drafted.
Yeah.
So I really don't consider LeBron as part of this whole free agent market. It's just a matter of what number he signs for to stay in LA.
Yeah, I think LeBron's going to spend at least the rest of his playing career in Los Angeles. I mean, he turns 40 in December. His son is now on the team, as you had just mentioned. I mean, he's got nothing left to prove at this point. I think for now, he just wants to settle in Los Angeles.
Sure, sure. And the prevailing odd thing idea that was out there was the 76ers drafting Bronny James to try and lure LeBron over. Well, obviously that didn't take place. So they get Paul George. They extend these other players, Maxi and Drummond, or along with Embiid. Considering Embiid's injury history, I think having Paul George there can help bridge the gap to not have them play in these play-in games where it's kind of one and done, so they can focus a little more on getting deeper into the playoffs. Because remember, Embiid is the only MVP not to make a conference finals. So these things the management, I feel, are taking a look at and saying, what's that one piece? They don't want to overhaul the entire thing, the whole trust the process thing. What's that one piece that's going to put them over the top? And Paul George is definitely a piece that they could use in distributing, and that's what he's going to be asked to do, as well as pour in more than 20 points a game. So I think it's a good fit for them. I would grade this as more than likely a B plus addition. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, I would probably go for a solid B, but B plus. I think that's fair.
So, with that being said, there's another team that really went the route of keeping their core group together, and that is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And when they went into free agency here, they wanted to make sure that this group that had that top seed in the West going into the playoffs, you want to keep such a young group together so to create that continuity so they can move forward. And to me, David, the biggest signing that they had was Isaiah Hartenstein. Uh, with the way the West is being played right now, with bigs in the middle, I think he is a huge addition to next year's roster. Which that's really what's happening here. All these teams are overturning their roster because of the way that contracts work in the NBA. Uh, do you see this these moves from the Oklahoma City Thunder paying dividends for a deeper run than what they had this year?
I think so. And I think you can make a case that Isaiah Hartenstein so far is the best free agent signing as far as, filling out a specific role. Because as great as the Thunder were last year, I mean, they were the number one team in the West. They had a
Mm-hmm.
glaring weakness at rebounding. They were a bottom five rebounding team. And I saw that Hartenstein averaged like 11.3 rebounds per game, like per 36 minutes. So adding a guy like that, to a team that suffered greatly on the glass is, obviously that's a huge kudos to Sam Presti for addressing a glaring need there.
Yeah, and once again, he's a young player that is on a young team, and that's really what opens the window for championships.
Yeah.
Uh, with that, so they could play together for quite a few years, and just like the Warriors did. And speaking of the Warriors, they've had to have some turnover
Hmm.
in this free agent period to look toward the future by not hanging on so hard to the past.
Hmm.
You know, with uh, we did see them release Chris Paul, who was kind of brought in as a hey, let's see if this works type of deal, and it didn't quite work out. They had to say goodbye to Klay Thompson, one of the Splash Brothers. That's the one that really kind of breaks up this whole Warriors dynasty idea from what everybody knows of their quote big three. You had the Splash Brothers and Draymond Green. Well, Klay Thompson hasn't really played like himself over the past few years, so
Hmm.
it's time to not pay him for what he did previously in your organization. Pay him for the player that he is now. Now, we did see Klay Thompson get what get some good money by being on the free agent market, and where does he go? He goes right back into a contending team to the Dallas Mavericks as a third piece for Luka and Kyrie. Are you seeing this as a net positive for that duo to add Klay Thompson, or is this a just a shot in the dark to try and relive past glory?
I think it can be a net positive so long as Dallas doesn't turn Clay Thompson into something that he's not. Because what is Clay Thompson? He is a role player. He is an elite role player, or at least he used to be an elite role player. Especially when it comes to shooting the basketball. One of the things that we often hear about Clay Thompson that's actually just very, very overrated is, well, Clay Thompson is so good at defense. No, he's not. I'm not saying he's terrible at defense, but you look at his defensive numbers and they're like below average, average at best. So I really don't understand where this whole notion that Clay Thompson is an underrated, low key good defender. Like, I don't even know. I have no idea where that even came from.
I don't think it's so much a matter of him being a good defender as he helped create some stops. When you are scoring as much as what the Warriors were scoring, you just need a few stops and you win ball games.
That's fair.
And Draymond is designed to have stops down low. Clay and Steph, they'll create a couple of pass off stops at the top of the key and around the horn. So he is good defensively at getting a couple of stops, but
Yeah.
not a true defensive player.
Well, and
And I think that's the confusion that I think people make when trying to add to the value of what he is.
yeah, that's fair. And I think the other potential issue with Clay that I think people really need to be asking of themselves, and listen, I wanted Clay to come to Orlando. I would have been ecstatic if he had come to Orlando. But I think a question that people really need to ask themselves is: was Clay Thompson simply just a product of the Steph Curry system? And there was one game where I don't remember the exact numbers, so this is just kind of a ballpark, but there was one game where he went crazy. He scored like 45 or 50 points on just 6 or 7 dribbles. I mean, what does that tell you that a player is able to score that many points on so few dribbles? Like, to me, that just tells me that he had a great supporting cast around him that knew how to pass him the ball, knew how to get him the ball in those situations. And you got to wonder, like, he's not going to be in that system anymore. So will he be able to thrive without it?
Yeah, and the system that they've run, everything runs through a section of the floor, not necessarily to a player. So he benefited from that and being a great catch and shoot guy.
Exactly.
So what we're expecting from him next year is another 22 points to tack on to Kyrie and Luka, and hopefully create some spacing if they go against the Celtics again, which we'll get to them in a minute. Uh, so that way, uh, it lets Luka do what he needs to do and gives Kyrie some space to do what he needs to do so he can get over that mental block that he has about being in Boston because apparently that was a thing over the NBA Finals that he just didn't seem to be able to get over. So uh, you get Klay Thompson to create some the spacing. I think of it, if you, for those old school people out there, I think of the Chris Mullins and the Dan Marleys, because there were dribble drivers, there were slashers, and then you had your kick out guy. That's going to be his role in the Mavs offense. And if he can connect, if he can play, and he can create a positive plus minus situation while he's on the floor, which he was negative this past year with the Warriors, by the way, then I think this is definitely a net positive and creates just more of a logjam at the top of the Western Conference.
Without a question.
Now, and talk. So we've talked the Klay Thompson landing spot. Now it's time to talk the Chris Paul landing spot. And this one I thought was pretty interesting. Um, Chris Paul, he decides to go to the Spurs. And what do the Spurs have? They have a unicorn. And he's going to ride that unicorn all the way into maybe 10 more wins than what the Spurs had this past year.
Yeah.
He signs a 1 year, $11 million deal to be that professional player that Wimbenyana can get mentorship from over this next season. Do you see some other positives of him being in San Antonio?
I mean, I think that's the biggest reason why they brought him to San Antonio, to be a mentor to, Victor Wembanyama. Because at this point, Chris Paul is nothing but a role player now at this point. I mean, the guy's 38, 30, 39 years old, and certainly not the same player that he was when he was with the New Orleans Hornets, back when they were the New Orleans Hornets. And who did he play? Oh, the Clippers as well. So certainly, I don't think the Spurs expect to get that kind of Chris Paul. So yeah, I think this is just more of a let me mentor this guy and just help him get more more well adjusted in this league, even though he's pretty much already adjusted himself pretty well.
Yeah, I definitely see this as a last ride. I gain some extra value, and then when the trading deadline comes in, see if he's worth getting some pieces back
Yeah,
for the remainder of the season. But until then, while he's in San Antonio, it is the coach on the floor mentorship role that
yeah.
he is going to fulfill for
Well,
Coach Popovich.
yeah. Well, and here's the other thing too, Ed. Has Chris Paul given up on trying to get a ring? Like, has he reached the point in his career where he realizes that he'll probably never win a ring now at this point? Because if you think he's going to win a ring in San Antonio now at this point, I mean, this isn't the Spurs of the 2000s, baby. Like, those teams are long gone.
They are definitely long gone, and you kind of see that with some NFL players as well that will jump around, like your Chad Ochocinco's and your Terrell Owens, and you know you think he's doing good, but he really just wants to play, and
Hmm.
that's kind of where we see uh, Chris Paul going into this next season in San Antonio, kind of a ride off into the sunset, go out on your terms, that type of thing. It isn't
Yeah,
because nobody wanted you; it's because you're saying I'm done and I'm going to move into a coaching role. Because this is something that hasn't been talked about a lot. There is a possibility that Chris Paul could be using this as an audition to be in Coach Popovich's coaching staff
yeah,
once he hangs it up at the end of the year,
yeah,
which he's got a great basketball mind. He can impart a lot of knowledge,
yeah.
and that's something that is worth taking a look into. Life after being a player in the NBA.
Yeah, and people don't really think about this, Ed, because he doesn't have a NBA championship, and more than likely at this point won't win one. He doesn't have an NBA MVP, although I really truly believe that he got robbed in 2008. I think Chris Paul should have won an MVP. he should have won the MVP in 2008. But if you look at Chris Paul's numbers and you stack them up with point guards in history, like Chris Paul is up there with some of the best point guards to have ever played. It's just
Mhm.
that because he doesn't have the most important accolades, people don't really think about it a lot. But his resume stacks up well against some of the best up there.
Sure. And when you talk about great point guards that didn't get the ring that they deserved in getting for being such a good player for such a long time,
Steve
I
Nash.
immediately
Steve
Nash.
Nash, yeah.
I was going to go Stockton.
Yep,
Uh,
that's a good one too.
I was going to go Kevin Johnson. Uh, there's a few out there in that point guard position that they needed something else.
Yeah.
A point guard by themselves, I don't feel like is a position on the floor that can take a team by himself and take them uh, to the promised land.
Yeah.
So he's always needed that extra person, and he had that when he was in LA with Blake, so
Yep.
Blake Griffin. So
Yeah.
that was probably his best chance in my mind.
No,
Uh,
I agree 100%.
so on the flip side, so going back to the Warriors, that's where Chris Paul has landed after leaving the Warriors. So what do the Warriors do? They have to start signing some people, and they did sign DeAnthony Melton. And for my money, I think they're trying to create a great value version of Klay Thompson, not having to pay the extra money for a shooter from the outside, which Klay Thompson wasn't there during all the championships. Klay Thompson wasn't getting all the accolades and the commercials and the radio spots and the podcast. No, he is a player that is making his way, and this allows the Warriors to save a little money, get a younger player, and look toward the future because here in the next few years, we could be seeing Draymond Green and seeing Steph Curry maybe age out a little bit. And if the Warriors want to keep moving forward, they have to start making shrewd moves like this to restack the roster on a yearly basis.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when it comes to Steph Curry, we've seen how he plays without Kevin Durant. That was a debate for for whatever reason, even though he already proved himself without Kevin Durant before. Well, we talk about how Klay Thompson's going to do without being in the Warrior system, Ed. Well, how is how is Steph Curry going to do without Klay Thompson? Now, I think Steph Curry is far more capable of still contributing at a high elite level without Klay Thompson than Klay Thompson is without Steph Curry, right? But that was such a deadly iconic duo that when you break them apart, man, it's just like they're neither one of them is going to be the same.
Sure. And because we're football people, I'm going to throw a football reference out there that may be a little older than you, but
Try
it's
me.
from your state. So you should know this.
Okay.
And I'm going to call it the Marx Brothers. Between Mark Duper and Mark Clayton catching passes from Dan Marino, they were an iconic duo in the 80s. Just fantastic wide receivers, and they complemented each other so well on the field. They aged out, and they were never the same without having the other one there.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the way I see it. Because I'm a football guy, I make no bones about that. That's that's kind of the correlation that I give for the football aspect of what
Mhm.
uh, the Splash Brothers have meant to basketball.
Yeah, well, I hate to disappoint you, but I actually did not know about that duo. But I'm also not a Dolphins fan, so I don't feel bad.
We certainly know a couple that would love that reference. Uh, so we've talked about a couple of teams that have made some that have been in the spotlight for the moves that they've made. Let's focus in on a couple of players. And the first one, and I think the one that has to be talked about, is Jason Tatum.
Oh yes. And let me tell you, like when I saw the news of his contract extension, like this was me. He got how much now?
$313 million.
I mean, this is like he's the first $300 million player, right? In NBA
Yes,
history. Okay.
yes. And my question is he the best player on the team?
I
The-
mean, him or Jalen Brown. I mean, Jalen Brown won.
But the fact that there's even a question of that
Yeah,
makes
no,
me wonder if this contract is really kind of valid, right?
yeah,
Because if you're getting that kind of money, you better be the swingingest dude walking in the locker room.
yeah,
And I don't know if he is,
yeah. Well, and
considering everybody else that they put around that team.
yeah,
Now,
well,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, this is a point that I've made quite a bit on this show, but I don't like. If you think about it, there's really no such thing as overpaying players, at least in the broad sense of the term, because the market in any league is just constantly going up. The NBA, of course, being included there.
Hmm. And but you also take a look around Tatum. They just won a championship. They are uh, probably going to get Porzingis back at some point next year.
Yeah,
He'll
and
probably
Al
miss the first half of the season though.
and Al Horford's coming back apparently.
And Al Horford's coming back. You're going to have Jalen Brown. You just drafted pretty well. There's there's a lot of optimism in Boston, and there's a lot of money in Boston because
Mhm.
apparently there's a $1 billion on the payroll uh, upcoming over the next few years, and that leaves me some question for pause because it's a soft cap, yes, but are the Celtics really willing to pay that much luxury tax to keep this core of players together? And that's that's really going to be the question in my mind on how uh, all in are they on these back to back on this dynastic talk that we've all talked about being uh, whether it be on the internet, whether it be on talk radio, whether it be on TV. Everybody talked about, oh, this will be a dynasty. This will be a dynasty. Well, you have to pay the players at some point to be the dynasty, and the Celtics are willing to pay players, but how long can they pay these players uh, at the rate that they are getting money to not bankrupt the organization at the same time?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Now, another uh, chip that has fallen as far as individual players is James Harden. Uh, he was set to be a free agent, but he's decided I'm good. I guess he's another one of those players that is tired of traveling the country trying to chase a ring and it not happening, and he's just willing to say, okay, well, I can score points and not play defense in LA with the Clippers, so eh, let's go ahead and do that. But do you think 35 million a year is worth it for him?
No, and to be honest with you, Ed, I think James Harden is arguably the most overrated player in the league. If he's not the most overrated, he's certainly top five. Most overrated because you said it, he's a scorer. He can score very well, although half the times he's flopping to get free throws. So I'm not really sure how impressed by his scoring we should get. And he doesn't play defense either. And he's somebody that you cannot rely on in the playoffs. Ed, I don't remember the exact numbers, but to the best of my knowledge, and this is very staggering, his record in Game 7 is like 1-5, 1-4.
I
I
think
don't
it was
remember.
one in
I don't know.
six. I
Yeah,
think it
one
was
and
one in
six,
six. Yeah.
something like that. And in Game 7, he's averaging like 13, 14 points a game on 35, 36% shooting.
Hmm.
He is not somebody that you can rely on in crunch time. He's not.
Yeah, and those game seven uh, performances, that is your legacy when you are talking about long term history of the NBA, what people think of you. Because I'll throw a name out there. I know I keep going in the Wayback Machine for some of this stuff, but I'll go back to Dominique Wilkins.
Hey, I know who that is.
Who did he play for?
Well, I know he played for the Hawks, but did he play for them
Yes.
his whole career?
Played for the Atlanta Hawks, and he was a phenomenal driver, dunker, offensive player. Did a little defense, but not much. And he never got any accolades because he could never get over that hump. His his nickname was the human highlight reel, which I feel like in the media of today where everything's magnified,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen more clips of James Harden going to the bathroom than I have of him playing defense. So having having a player like Dominique Wilkins as the comp, he could never get over that hump because he could never win those series. And look who showed up that kind of got in his way, and it was MJ in the Eastern Conference that got in his way because at that time he was going against Boston, he was going against Detroit, he was going against MJ's Bulls, and Harden, he has moved around and tried to create these super teams to give himself a better opportunity to win championships. That window's passed him by,
Yeah.
and I he he is certainly not going to score average a number of points per game to equal per $1 million that he's getting per year.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and Harden, like, Harden really had two chances to win an NBA title, and that was with the Thunder when they also had Westbrook, KD, and Ibaka, and the Rockets when it was him and Chris Paul, and those Rockets teams were some freaking really good teams, but those were his two best chances, and unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to get it done. And I like what you said before, Ed, that much like Chris Paul. Now James Harden has gotten to a point where it's like, okay, well, at this point it is what it is. Although I think we can all agree that the Clippers have a far better chance at winning an NBA title nowadays than the Spurs do. So it's not over yet for James Harden, but it's getting close to being over for him.
I think there's a greater chance of James Harden making it to the playoffs with the Clippers than Chris Paul with the Spurs.
Yeah.
But I do not see him going past the first round,
Oh,
if you will.
I don't either. I mean, maybe the first round, but yeah, definitely don't see him ever making it to a finals game ever again. Even though he's never made it as a starter, he's only made it as a role player.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. So kind of leads to the question: who's going to be the better team in LA next year? Because we still don't know what the Lakers are going to look like. The
I
Clippers
think
are going to be the Clippers. I mean,
Ed, I think it's still going to be the Clippers, man. I mean, they just came off like a 51, 52 win season, I think. I think Tyronn Lue has proven himself to be a very good coach. So yeah, I think Clippers are still going to be the best team, but they are certainly as far as like the other championship contenders, you can pretty much just take the Clippers off the list because they are not winning a championship with that core.
agreed. Very much agreed. But I'm sure you've got some notes to say about our next contestant in the free agent frenzy. Orlando Magic has picked up Contavious Caldwell Pope for 3 years and $76 million. The floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, Ed. Well, after hyping up the offseason, um, for the past couple months or so, and just thinking that we're going to get guys like Paul George, Clay Thompson, we're going to get all the big free agents, and we signed Contavious Caldwell Pope. But make no mistake, this is an excellent signing because, for one, KCP provides an area that we sorely lack in, and that's shooting. And for about the past 5 years or so, KCP has been shooting the three ball at around a 40% clip. But what also makes KCP, so valuable for the role that he brings in is that he's also an excellent defender. I mean, for his career, he's averaged over a steal a game. And together with Jalen Suggs, you can make the argument that he and Suggs will combine to form the best, backcourt defensive duo in the league. And with Suggs, with KCP, with Jonathan Isaac, who we just brought back for 5 years, 84 million, I think you can make a very strong argument that Orlando could be entering this upcoming season as the best defensive team in the league. I mean, we were top three, top five. I think it was top five. We were a top five defensive team, just this past season. And we've gotten better defensively with a guy like KCP. So I think this is an excellent signing. Certainly not a signing that I was personally expecting, but when you look at what KCP provides, and you look at the role that he plays, I don't think any Magic fan can be disappointed by this. And I think Denver fans are going to miss him sorely.
Yeah, and there's tons of other uh, free agents that have been out there that are good ideas and bad ideas, and I would certainly like to talk about all of them. But we did want to touch on a little NHL action uh, in free agency, and really, I wanted to take a minute and talk about the opening window of championship that the Predators just went out and bought up,
Yeah.
basically,
I
uh,
mean,
in, the, in the first 24 hours.
when you sign two 40 goal scorers, man, you automatically win the offseason right there. I don't care what happens the rest of this time. Like, you win the offseason right there.
Completely. Uh, and for those that hadn't seen, we're talking about Scott Wedgwood from the Dallas Stars was signed by the Predators. Jonathan, uh, please help me with
Mar-
this. Marshall
I think
Salt,
I think it's Marcia. So I think the
Marshall
LP
Salt,
is silent, but yeah,
okay,
pronounce it how you think.
from Las Vegas Golden Knights. Brady, help me. Skajay from Carolina Hurricanes, and and I'm sorry to
Say
have to
it.
say it, David.
Say it.
Steven Stamkos from the Tampa Bay Lightning, which, for those that have not been able to see it on the screen here, uh, my good friend David is wearing his Tampa Bay Lightning jersey in mourning, I'm guessing, from the news of Stamkos leaving. Uh, but as far as putting these players together on the Predators roster, do they automatically put themselves in a position to challenge Dallas and Edmonton and Las Vegas and Colorado for the Western Conference?
Oh, without question. And you're a moron if you think otherwise. I mean, look at what happened. Like, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year, right? And then they just went on a freaking tear in the second half. And did they advance to the second round, or did they lose in the first round?
Uh, they lost to Vancouver.
And that was the first round.
I believe so.
Okay, so they lost in the first round, but it was a very, I would argue, it was a very competitive. I think it was a 6 game series, a very competitive, 6 game series. And yeah, you bring in Marshall Salt, whatever, Stamkos. Those are the two 40 goal scorers that we've been talking about. I mean, you win the offseason. I mean, you don't make these kinds of moves, Ed, if you don't feel confident that you're up there with the big boys of the West. And I think right now the Predators are up there with the big boys of the West.
Yeah, and I don't want to overlook the pickup of Scott Wedgwood in goal. This is a guy that has uh, been sitting the bench at a 900 save percentage uh, uh, behind Dallas's goalie. Uh, help me, uh,
Oh, isn't there goalie
Ottinger.
Yeah.
I had the first syllable but I couldn't get the rest of it out. Uh, he's been sitting behind Ottinger, and was the ability for Ottinger to take some rest days while still gaining points over this past season. He has a 16-7. He had a 16-7-5 record uh, through last season at a 900 save percentage. This is a good pickup for the Predators, and it gives them the opportunity to put somebody in net that they feel that they can lean on long term, as opposed to uh, kind of working out the kinks, so to speak. So when you have more goal scorers, that typically history will tell us will open up more lanes for breaks getting to goal. They need somebody that will be that wall for them, and Scott Wedgwood, I think he's got a bright future to go ahead and do that for them.
Mm, yeah.
Um, Now with Tampa Bay losing Stamkos, I wanted to give you a good minute and a half, if you want, uh, to talk about how Tampa Bay got to this point, and what they're doing to replace him and moving forward.
Well, how we got here, you have to kind of go back all the way to the last training camp. And I didn't really think about it at the time, but I think it was a bad omen when it was reported that we weren't even going to discuss contract um, talks with Stamkos until after the season had ended. And unfortunately, just talks never went anywhere. Now, I think everybody knows Steven Stamkos wanted to retire as a Bolt. He wanted to play his entire career here in Tampa. And I already ranted about this in a short yesterday, so I'll try to be more calm about this. But we're not talking of like, is Steven Stamkos still in his prime? Probably not, but he is still a 35 to 40 goal scorer. uh, he's still someone that's effectively lethal on the power play. It's not like he's turned into some scrub. And the way that JBB just completely lowballed him, I mean, I would have left too if I was Stamkos. And you listen to the interviews with Stamkos, and it sounds like there's some bad blood between him and the front office, or certainly between him and JBB, our general manager. And I've seen people try to make the argument with, well, we got better on paper with Jake Gensel, to which I say, okay, yeah, maybe we did. Are the Lightning still going to have a good season? Yeah, probably. Are we going to make the playoffs? Yeah, probably. We still got some good players. But Ed, that's not the point. It's not about numbers. It's about heart and soul. Steven Stamkos was the heart and soul of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He gave not just this team, but he gave the city everything that he could give, right? And when you lose that, when you lose your heart and soul of the team, that affects the chemistry of the locker room. That affects everybody around you. Again, it's not about the numbers. It's about, it's about the heart and soul. I mean, I'm repeating myself here, but it's the truth. And it just disgusts me that Steven Stamkos was essentially treated like dirt. But I'm also not surprised, Ed, because I really truly believe that winning the cup in 2020 without Stamkos diminished Stammer's value in the eyes of JBB. And also considering all the other times that we won without Stamkos. Because to JBB, he's probably thinking, well, we won without you, okay? We don't need you. You need us. But no, like that's not the case. Even though Stammer wasn't playing in the 2020 playoffs, except for game 2 or game 3 of the finals when he had that epic goal against the Stars, right? Even when he wasn't playing, people were saying, well, the Lightning players were saying, well, there's no way we would have made it far without the leadership that Stamkos provided for us in the locker room. Okay. As I say over and over and over again, it's not always about the numbers. And listen, I'm very happy for Steven Stamkos, man. I think Nashville is getting a great guy, and I'm not surprised at all that he chose a team like the Predators. And the reason why I say that is because, Steven Stamkos often, it's not just Stamkos. It's any player who plays here in Tampa, and for the Bucks, for the Rays, but for the Lightning, since we're talking about the Lightning, right? What they often rave about is how in a market like Tampa, they get treated like normal people, right? Like you can be a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning and go shop at Publix, which is a local grocery store in the area, or you could just spend some time with their family, and nobody's going to bother you. Okay, it's not like Toronto or New York where you're recognized everywhere that you go. And I've been to Nashville. Ed, you and I have both been to Nashville, not at the same time, but we've both been there in the city. And not that Nashville is some kind of low key city because they have a great music vibe there, but I would argue that much like Tampa, that is also a city where athletes can go and after they're done doing their jobs, they can just live normally and they can just live without people bothering them so much. And I have to imagine that's a big reason why Steven Stamkos chose a team like the Predators, why he chose to go to Nashville. So all that being said, I wish it was handled better, but Steven Stamkos, man, the greatest Lightning player of all time, just tremendous, tremendous guy he is.
Thank you for that, David. And to go from what what you're saying is the best Lightning player of all time to somebody that is not the best Mets player to ever play, but maybe one of the most impactful as far as a GM position goes. Uh, as we talked about, we flipped the calendar to July 1st. And for those that are in the know, that is Bobby Bonilla Day.
Oh my
That
god!
is that is the day in which one Bobby Bonilla receives 1.2 million every July 1st until the year 2035. Now,
How, dude? I get that incompetent people exist, but how do you allow yourself to become that incompetent that you end up paying a guy $1 million every single freaking year? Like, how does that even happen?
oh, well, basically they went to overpay him. He got hurt. He stopped playing, and they did not want to be on the hook for his salary in uh, in the luxury tax era as it got started in MLB. So
Mhm.
they deferred him, and he's like, "Cool, you want to pay me $1 million, $1.2 million a year for the next 30 years?
He
Go
he
ahead."
he literally does not need to work a day in his life for the rest of his life now at this
No,
point.
no, no. And I mean, most of these ball players, that's the case anyway. But it is that concept has opened the door for more GMs to run their contracts like that. And we have a player in MLB right now that this is going to be the case for him once he stops playing because the contract is so big that there's no chance that they can pay him off in the time of him actually playing the game. And that's Shohei Ohtani. Like we talked about when the contract happened, he's getting basically $2 million a year for the next 10 years. And that is 20 million total of a $700 million contract. So what are they going to do? They're going to amortize that for probably 20 or so years after he stops playing to pay him every year. So that way the Dodgers organization can continue to gain talent and not be basically bankrupted by a contract that large. But that being said, there are other players that have come out of the woodwork that have the Bobby Bonilla type contract that are actually getting paid more than he is getting on a yearly basis because he's getting the 1.2 from the Mets. He's also getting $500,000 from the Orioles for the next, I believe it's 5 years. So he's still taking in that money. But just to give a reference uh, of players that have retired that are still collecting very large paychecks on a year to year basis, we're talking players like Darren O'Day. Who is that? I've never heard of him. But apparently he's getting $1 million a year from Baltimore as a 40-year-old uh, former relief pitcher. Uh, you've also got players like Todd Helton, Ryan Braun, Rafael Soriano, Dustin Pedroia, Manny Ramirez, John Lester, Ken Griffey Jr., and the
and
king, huh?
and Chris Davis.
And the king of this way of getting paid right now is Chris Davis.
Yeah,
Chris Davis, we talk about Bonilla's contract going for 30 years. Chris Davis is getting a total of $67 million from the Orioles after he retires.
yeah,
Right now, for this year, he got paid $14.8 million being retired. You talked about not having to work a day. There you go.
yeah.
Uh, Ken Griffey Jr.'s contract is from Cincinnati. Um, Granted, the end of his career was kind of cut short because of injuries, so that's why they did that for him to make sure that he got his guaranteed money uh, without it uh, without running into salary cap issues in MLB. But David, are we getting to a point where the contracts are too big that almost every player is going to wind up being paid after they retire?
Ed, we're talking about Major League Baseball here. I feel like every MLB contract is way too big, man. I mean, the MLB is literally certainly the only American sports league where you'll find players getting paid 10 to 15 years, 300 million, 400 million annually. Like, you're not going to find that in the NBA, NHL, or the NFL.
It's just such a such a crazy concept to continue to pay a player
Yeah.
hasn't been part of the game in 25 years.
By the way, you remember when Chris Davis was randomly the best home run hitter in the majors for a couple of years?
All or nothing, man.
Yeah, yeah,
All or nothing.
he's basically a more efficient version of Joey Gallo.
Oh my. Oh, that I really would love to see a home run hitting contest between those two guys and see how many balls are hit and how many balls are missed.
Oh, that would be highlight TV right there. That would be
That,
must see TV.
uh, it's the all or nothing home run derby, and that's exactly what that would be between those two guys. Uh, Now, for things that don't happen on an annual basis for July 1st, here we are. It's the end of the college school year. So, what does that mean? It means the school year has turned over as of July 1st. And we said a lot of stuff has happened over the turning of the calendar. Well, this is truly turning of the school calendar, and that means that all realignment has taken place. All of it. It's done. And one one uh, one thing that I wanted to point out is Texas, us going to the SEC, it is such a big deal here in Austin that they had an all day, 10-hour street fair with fireworks and drones and interviews and ESPN. Paul Feinbaum was in town. The whole kit and caboodle having a big old party. Just can't wait to get into the SEC, and it was just a spectacle. Which, given the money that Texas athletics takes in, why not have a party, right?
Mhm.
So I just like to throw that out there because that's right here in my backyard. But as we move into all this alignment, uh, where we see the two teams going to the SEC, the four teams going into the Big Ten, the three teams going into the ACC, the in and out of the Big 12. There's there's a lot of programs with a lot to prove this upcoming season, and one of the things that uh, gets proven every single year is the Directors Cup for college athletics. Uh, and it's something that they had started, I want to say, in the early 90s uh, to basically encompass the entire athletic department, not just football, not just baseball, not just basketball, but everything. You know, from your club sports to your tennis to your rowing to your swimming and diving, all that stuff. Uh, right as we go into this realignment, just want to give a little bit of breakdown. ACC will have four programs with at least 8 top 10 rankings in the Directors Cup. The Big Ten, with this move, now gains 5 programs with uh, 5 programs with 12 top 10 rankings. The SEC moves to having 3 programs with 8+ top 10 rankings, and the Big 12, lowly Big 12, only has one, and it is the Arizona Wildcats. It's it is a prestigious honor among college athletics, but it's not talked about in the same realm as the different main sports. So let me ask you, David, with the power conference realignments, where would you rank the Power Four as football conferences?
SEC, obviously. Even though the SEC didn't win the national championship, you got to look at their body of work within the past 10 years or so, and you got to say it's the SEC. So I would say SEC number one. I think number two, Big Ten. Uh, number three, I would say the ACC, and then number four, the Big 12. I think you got to put the Big 12 last, especially after a Texas and mainly Oklahoma. I think you would agree with the said. Mainly Oklahoma carried them, but Texas and Oklahoma, both carried them for the past 20 years or so. And you lose 2 programs like that, and the value of your conference goes down drastically. So I would put the Big 12 dead last.
Okay, and that's I want to argue with you, but I can't uh, because I have a difficult time not at least putting Big Ten number two for sure, considering that now the national championship from last year was 2 Big Ten teams.
That's true. Yeah.
So, and also now we see the ACC with, um, they really didn't add anything as far as higher end or competitive football programs. Their their hay is going to be made in the other sports that are out there, uh, and adding Cal and Stanford and SMU.
Hmm.
We will see SMU, like we talked about a couple of episodes ago. We will see SMU take that leap, but it's going to take a couple of years for that to happen. But that is talking about football. Do you see a change in what we anticipate for the top 4 conferences in basketball with this realignment?
So as far as basketball goes, for me personally, I would probably have the Big 12 as number one because Kansas is always up there, and Kansas just recently won a championship. Baylor's up there as well, and Baylor also recently won a championship, and Texas Tech, Iowa State now. So I will put the Big 12 number one. Number two, and you might not agree with this, Ed, but I think I would have the ACC as number two. I understand that the ACC kind of had a bit of a down year, but even in a down year, they still sent an 11th seed to the Final Four, and teams like North Carolina, Duke, Virginia are always going to be competitive. So I would put the ACC at number two. I think number three I would have the SEC, even though I don't think the SEC has won a basketball championship since Kentucky in 2012. But I would have the SEC at number three, and then at number four, I would. Wait, who does it leave at number four? So Big 12, ACC, Big 10. I would have Big 10 to last in basketball.
Where would you wedge in the Big East?
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about the Big East, man. Okay, let me start this over. I still stand by the Big 12 being number one, by the way.
They also have Arizona.
Yep, that's true. So Big 12 number one, ACC number two. I think I would have the Big East number three. So I would have the Big East number three, the SEC number four, and the Big 10 number five.
Okay. Okay. I I I have the Big 12 as number 1 as well. I'm sticking with the Big East being number 2. Uh, they have UConn, and everything revolves around basketball in that conference. Yes, they have some good baseball teams, but it is a basketball conference. There's
Mm-hmm.
no getting around that. Uh, it becomes a splitting hairs module to me between 3, 4, and 5 because yes, you do have the ACC with Duke and North Carolina. Those are always going to be the teams, but you also sometimes you'll get a Miami come out of nowhere. You'll get um, some of these other schools, even in the West Coast. Stanford winds up being good every now and again. Virginia's been good every now and again. You get a lot of teams that will rise up for a little while, then fade off, rise up and fade off. Uh, Whereas the Big Ten, they typically have their quote blue blood teams in that conference, and also the SEC is a rising conference in basketball. We definitely saw it this year with the rise of Auburn until they played the Ivy League for some reason. Uh, Alabama, Tennessee, you're getting Texas in this mix. Uh, there's so much momentum in the SEC in college basketball that they're starting to rival the ACC. It's kind of splitting hairs between those two, but
Yeah.
clearly in my mind, you had the Big 12, then you had the Big East, and then we can have a discussion about the other three.
Well, the reason why I have the Big East number three, but the reason why I hesitate to put the Big East in the top two, Ed, is because it just feels like a conference that's largely carried by UConn. Now, you might think, well, you have the Big 12 number one, and they're carried by Kansas, except that in the Big 12, yes, Kansas has been far and away the best team, but Texas Tech, Baylor, Iowa State, those are teams in the Big 12 that have always been good, or they've been good most of the times, right? It hasn't just been Kansas. Whereas with the Big East, Villanova used to dominate that conference, and then I think Creighton's in the Big East as well. Are they, Ed?
I believe so, but you're also talking St. John's, you're talking Syracuse, you're talking
I
Connecticut, of
thought
course.
I thought Syracuse was in the ACC. Are they in the Big East just for basketball?
You're in the Big East.
Okay, I did not. I actually did not know that. Yeah. I think it's a yeah. That's why I cannot. I understand what your argument for putting the Big East at number two, but I just have a hard time doing that because it just feels like a conference that's largely carried by one team right now, and that's UConn.
That's fair, and that's certainly worth the conversation. Which that's what we do. That's how we do this. Um, but those of us, those of y'all out there, what kind of rankings would you have on these power conferences in both football and basketball? Or do you have some thoughts on some of these free agent signings in the NBA? Please let us know in the comments. Uh, uh, but that's really all the time that we have for this evening. I really appreciate you tuning in. as David said before, like and subscribe. Let's get Matthew off the street corner handing out flyers so he can be with his family.
Yes,
And
please get off my corner, Matthew.
uh, and until next time, everybody, enjoy the holiday. And we are rounding third and headed for home.